Hello, thanks for joining our first Tech Talk from Valo AI. We're really thrilled that you're here. If you're struggling with user access controls or access controls across the board, you come to the right place. Or if you just want to be in the know from the experts on what's happening in this space, you've come to the right show. Let me first introduce Jari Salama, CEO of Valo. Welcome, Jari.
Hey, thank you, Allison. Great to be here. So I'm Yari. I'm originally from Finland, but been in the San Francisco Bay Area for about 17 years and currently the CEO co-founder of Valo AI.
Awesome. Thank you, Yari. And we'll learn more about you as through the discussions later. And Ari, great to have you here. Ari Leeds, CEO of LeedsSource. Why don't you introduce yourself a little bit?
Sure, thanks. Ari Leeds, right in the Boston area, in the suburbs actually. Been running a Salesforce consultancy for integrations and implementations for about 5 years and been in the space for about 14 years.
Nice. Look forward to hearing all your insights from, I know you do this on a daily basis, in and out. Myself, I'm Allison Taylor. I have two companies. I have a consultancy helping leaders like Yari and startup founders and corporates with their business and marketing. And then I have an AI startup in the marketing space. So lots of cool stuff we're going to talk about today on the AI front as well. But let's get right into some of the cool topics. If you want to know more about Valo and get a demo, we do have this slide. You can always rewind and grab and make sure you go to App Exchange to try out the Valo solution. Yari, why don't you bring us into what's happening in the Salesforce world and what's happening with users? What's going on?
Right. So Valo is a relatively new company. And as we were kind of starting the company, we did a partnership with a growth consulting company called Growberry, and they interviewed 30, 40 Salesforce admins around the world and found some very interesting stats where some of these stats talk about how Salesforce admins and architects are spending a lot of their time in the user management, user and access management, especially. So up to like 71% consider user and access management a time drain. And out of that number, actually, I think it was almost a 1 day a week, a very large chunk of time goes into actual implementation of user and access management inside Salesforce. And then in addition to that, nearly half of those interviewed organizations were stating that the current platform tools, the former product manager of event monitoring and event logs, especially, I take this to heart, that those tools about providing logs, who's using, who's not using, what are they doing inside the application, are not providing them enough value. So I think very interesting stats, and would really like to get Ari. I know you work with a lot of different organizations. Your thoughts into these numbers? Are they speaking the truth in your view?
Yeah, I'm really not surprised by these numbers. So many of the customers we work with, we're providing implementation services because their own in-house system admins are doing these things full time, and they don't have the time to actually make progress on some other projects, or we're the ones doing it because they don't have somebody to do it. And there's so much time is actually spent on managing users, whether it's onboarding, offboarding, migrating, etc. And when it comes to Shield, Shield is putting out a lot of great data, a lot of great tools, but there's a lot to digest there with Shield. So there's still a lot of steps people have to take once they implement Shield or obtain that Shield data from event monitoring, especially, to figure out what to do with it next.
Yeah, and I see that too from both the business owner side. Imagine a day a week I could free up on my team, what I could do with all that bandwidth instead of just managing users. And the length of time it takes, right? You have a new board, new hire, you just want to get them up and running, get them access, but it's just not that simple, as I guess we're going to talk about. So part of the dilemma you're saying, Yari, is people are spending a lot of time on this, but what are some of the other parts of this dilemma that you see for user access management?
Ari brought a very interesting point around the onboarding and especially also offboarding. One of the areas we observed is that like even people move around and they get assigned specific Salesforce licenses and user access. They move around, they leave the company. A lot of those accounts are marked inactive, but many of them actually have used their account for authorizing different third-party tools, marketing automations, build integrations around, and those tokens, auth tokens, are still live and well inside the system. So I think when looking at the entire scope, I'd like to kind of also highlight that we're not actually only talking about users as human users. We're also talking about non-human users, APIs, servers, activities between systems, and it's a multiple layered level where there's user authorizations and system level integrations in addition to the plain user access. So I think when we're looking at that kind of, we have to look at it from a broad lens.
No, definitely. When you said multi-layer, I had thought about this on the weekend too. It's a mashup. A mashup is happening because it's the roles view, the permissions view, and the legitimacy view. Like, is that person still an employee? And or did they invoke, as you said, all of these things we didn't even know they invoked, and they're still lingering? And Ari, I don't know how much you see of those types of issues day to day with your clients.
Yeah, definitely. Offboarding is an especially challenging one. Onboarding can be too, but it's additive. And you see when people are onboarding, especially more sophisticated organizations, there's not just the profile and the role anymore. There's immense amounts of permission sets, permission set groups, public groups, sharing rule, all these different things that user management depends on to give people the right stuff and for people to have the right things they need to do their job. Then when it comes to offboarding, it's almost as complicated as uninstalling an app or a package because they're so intertwined, they're so baked into the system. I mean, even something as simple as running a dashboard as a user, but as Yari mentioned, even more critical things like auth keys, we see that all the time. So the user is a really deeply critical part of how everything runs, and it's not so easy to just plug in and unplug without having a lot of details about what that user's touching.
Yeah, and I think you said it well earlier. You mentioned something about it being wired in, right? A lot of things are more wired in than we realize. So I might think my admin for Salesforce is taking a really long time. Like, can't you just add that user? Why is it taking so long? But it turns out so many things are hardwired. It's just not a simple task.
Yeah, that's right. You can add the user. You can't necessarily get them up and running.
There you go.
I have actually a question to Ari, thinking about the size of the organizations, knowing your great background. You worked in CloudLock and you worked with a number, you've been an ISV and now you're doing consulting. And do you think like size matters, like, for an organization that like, you think that like, hey, the larger the implementation of Salesforce in a larger organization, do they have like more of this problem? Or do you think that then like an organization that only has like, hey, 20 accounts and, that it's a smaller problem to solve for them? Any thoughts or observations, like, working with maybe a smaller implementations versus a larger one?
Yeah, I mean, I think with large ones, it kind of comes automatically. Like as you get larger, you tend to go more complex. It's not automatic, but it tends to happen that way. But I've seen some small ones that are quite complex as well. So small and medium ones, a lot of companies are investing a lot of money into Salesforce as a business operating system, but then all these additional third-party apps layered on top, connected apps and managed packages. They may also be in an industry where where compliance is very serious or security is very serious, or they're publishing a lot of technology themselves and have to take those things seriously. So size matters to an extent, but it doesn't mean that if you're not big, it doesn't matter. There's certainly a lot of this problem in complexity comes with small organizations. I've definitely seen it with organizations with under 100 users, even under 50 users. It can take 30 minutes to onboard somebody and maybe much longer actually to properly and cleanly offboard them.
Great, love it. So if you're a listener and you're watching this, you are not alone. If you're struggling with user management of any kind, no matter what company size, it sounds like. So let's help these viewers out. What are some of the opportunities? What are the solutions, trends that we can envision? And I'll kick one off that I'm excited about what I've seen with Yari's doing and how we're bringing in Salesforce consultants to work on this. Just the topographical view, the visibility or the observability. So Yari, I don't know if you would agree with observability being an interesting way to approach this.
I think like whether or not you're typically like, landing into a new Salesforce implementation, you need to kind of quickly understand how they've implemented XYZ. I think like I built a product in Salesforce called the Salesforce Security Health Check. And the idea of that product was to kind of quickly audit the environment, to give a score, what's going on, so that then a security team can kind of quickly assess it. And I feel that similarly and equally, when we think about, users and access management, like understanding this kind of a bigger picture quickly is a lot of value. In Salesforce, you have like org-wide defaults, sharing rules, permission sets, profiles, users, roles, groups. There's multiple ways to kind of get to ultimately at the same outcome, and understanding like how much customization and how much of the beaten path the customer has gone is of high value, and kind of like layering that kind of like access graph and understanding what exists here, I think is definitely, and there's a lot of, I think, tools that then do that in a different ways. And, and there's some solutions that can, provide you kind of key insights, and you can kind of compare, what users are different. Like, hey, Ari doesn't have the same access as Allison. What's wrong? How do I compare? And there's the different kinds of solutioning around that, which I believe that now the key trend and the opportunity is like, how do we make these solutions take action? Like how we can actually not just like get those insights and then build up our backlog and work, and about how can we maybe minimize that time of like 30 minutes to onboard a user, like how we can make that in 3 minutes, or can we make that in a minute?
Right, because I'm surprised, and I don't think Ari will find it surprising, but how many different ways you can perform a task also adds to the complexity. And I would much rather be able to click a button and just have it done for me. But it's almost like there's 5 different ways to do it, and there's 17 clicks per way, and you need to know the 5 ways. So I think there's like a lot of opportunity here for what you're describing, not just to observe it, to then actually do the remediation or the follow-up. But Ari, what do you see day to day? You're in this all day long.
Yeah, I mean the observability is huge to see, the impact that, maybe a single like a legacy user or user has been in there taking a look at what they can talk to, what they can do, and then thinking about onboarding new people and thinking, well, what does it take to get them to be able to do the same thing that other person can do? That could be a research project if you don't have a tool that gives you that observability. And so you start seeing a lot of these things coming out. There's a lot of free ones on the App Exchange that really try to help admins with these very specific tools. So that's part of the trend side, right? So you see that everyone's trying to kind of conquer this thing. I think the opportunity really is in really the best practices in that actions, as Yari mentioned, is, well, seeing is one thing, doing is another level, and then doing it right is another level beyond that. So, we can always give everybody system admin access, but I wouldn't say that's doing it right? We don't want to just blanket everybody. There's a lot of concerns for following certain models for security and compliance. We hear the term least privileged access all the time, which is really creating that really tight, kind of think of it as like a shrink wrapped permissions around a user for what they really need to perform their business function without overextending that. So I think there's a huge opportunity in figuring out how to create those shrink wrapped user management solutions that everybody always wants to do, but doesn't have the time or the patience to actually do.
That's where I see you two pairing well on this innovation piece as we think about how that's going to play out, because I'm going to need a person with judgment and thought who has experience on best practices to come in and tell me what I should be doing as a business owner. These are best practices. But then I need something that Yari, which is the speed and efficiency that it brings to it. And especially that compare contrast part sounds like it's very valuable to be able to see side by side. And Yari, maybe you can, if you agree, that's an opportunity you can talk to, or a solution.
I think when we think about solutioning overall, I feel that like some of the key elements are kind of pretty transactional. This is not rocket science in a way, but like I think the customization of the environment and the applying the same kind of a template of a solution might be more difficult due to the fact that like in these open platforms and anything built over APIs that can look different requires contextual understanding. And I think that's where the metadata and all the custom capabilities that the customer or the specific environment has done is very important to translate towards the solution and understanding the environment where we operate. Because sometimes what maybe is an obvious solution may not be that obvious. There might be some layers and reasons for that kind of complexity. And I think it's important for the solutions to understand that.
I agree. It's hard to figure out the intentions of how something was built, and you have to believe in it to some extent that somebody set something up for a reason, or you have to be able to at least unwind it. Having the tool sets to be able to figure that out would be very helpful.
Yeah, which kind of leads us into, all right, the future and kind of moving into AI, generative AI, or both. Thinking a little bit about how this is going to impact the field, whether that's Salesforce as your ecosystem or another CRM or another SaaS environment. So Ari, let's kick off with you. And what do you see as the role here for AI?
I think AI has huge potential in this space, and specifically in this space because there's so much metadata and so much structure in these environments. I think those types of structures actually can create really good guardrails for AI to not just do, one of the biggest problems with AI now is that it tries to mimic what it thinks sounds like the right answer, right? We hear about this thing called hallucinations with AI. And we see that a lot with the large language models, ChatGPT and such. But with Salesforce, we have so much metadata. We have permission sets, we have flows, we have users, we have S objects. We have all this metadata that can really, put the AI on the rails of what actually can be done and what actually should be done. So I think with some guidance for an AI solution that can suggest, look at a pattern of what you're trying to do. Maybe you're trying to get a person one very basic permission, let's say, but there is no one permission set that has that. And you really need to figure out what's the environmental impact of giving them a permission set that has it, but that may have other things, or upgrading their profile or permission set that, if you do that, also affects other users in the environment. So kind of having something that can really give you a very fast statistical look at what has been done before and offer you a solution very quickly without you having to create, that 2-week-long research project to figure out how to give somebody one permission and do it right, by the way. Giving them the permission's easy. Doing it right is the hard part. I think would be very, very powerful. And I think, like I said, with all the structure that Salesforce provides, I think it could put it on fantastic footing for really powerful solution.
Yeah, interesting, especially the metadata view, which I know, Yara, you've gone down that path with your company. So what are your thoughts?
I echo strongly what was said before. Maybe I'll take a little higher viewpoint to open up this point. I strongly believe that in the overall SaaS management and Salesforce administration also included into that, AI plays a pivotal role. It's going to change the way that we administrate, monitor, work on these tools. And I think the nature of now this day-to-day administration is also going to change quite radically, using these AI tools that actually can perform continuous monitoring and observability into these platforms, what's going on, and then freeing up and automating a lot of those administrative workflows when users need access. Like, do you really need a human to evaluate it? You can create a rule engine and a policy to then automate a lot of those access requests, and whether they are permanent, they're dynamic, they are applied only for a one time, for one day, 1 week. And I think it's up to us as humans to build those policies and guardrails and be the supervisor of the models and really kind of create additional effectiveness into the SaaS administration. And I think to also add on what Ari said, I feel that the capabilities that humans have in terms of our work, we have like 8 hours a day or maybe 9-10 hours workday that we can do. AI doesn't need to sleep, or it can continually serve an organization throughout borders, through globally, and no longer the admin is a bottleneck as much as it may have been in the past. That like, hey, when are we able to implement that new permission set or role? Like, I think AI is definitely going to reduce and table a lot of time, and I think these kind of mundane, repetitive tasks that today take like several hours or even weeks to figure out are just going to be table stakes, and we're able to use AI tools that are grounded, and they have a full understanding of the customer's metadata context. They subscribe and read the event logs, so they understand what the users are doing, and then together they provide a very powerful way to coexist with the human administrator, but table a lot of those repetitive tasks. And I think there's also the final point around accuracy, where I think the humans unfortunately make mistakes and misconfigurations. They are in a hurry, or they might not know what to actually click or do, and then the person or the documentation is not maybe clear enough for them to do that. Whereas, and I think AI can actually learn and compare from other environments and be pretty precise and accurate over the human.
No, that's absolutely a great frame up, because there's no question what we think of today as an admin for a SaaS tool is going to be completely different in the future. We need to rethink how the person and the machine work together and move toward an oversight role and a judgment role. And I think, to Ari's point, even baking in at the front end what the best practices are, whether you're Ari, who's a consultant coming in, seeing what's happening, or whether you're Yari, the innovator, developing the tool that can bake in a lot of the remediation right at the get-go. So it's pretty interesting that's definitely going to shift. It reminds me a bit of digital transformation, right? We used to have to fax things in to get an order way in the day, right? And then it became OCR and digital ways to have these transactions happen. And now we have digital transactions that are automated to the 10th degree. And so part of this makes me think of, okay, what happens when Ari, your client, now has Yari's tool in place? It's automatically scanning, it's automatically finding, it's automatically doing. Now what happens then?
We get to be creative and get out of the mundane stuff. This is, you could look at it as, oh, what am I going to do? Or what's an admin to do even in an organization? But this is not the stuff we want to spend our time doing. We want to solve business problems and be creative and not think about user management and, doing all these kind of grind projects that really are really just basic business, keeping the business up and running. Onboarding users should be turnkey, and it used to be, but it's becoming difficult, not just in Salesforce, but really in any really large platform now where you have access control. And we would rather spend our time, translating business requirements into creative solutions, not wiring up users. So sounds good to me.
Sign me up for taking administration out of the daily work process.
Yes.
Gary, how do you see it? See it similarly?
Yeah, no, I think so. Based on the kind of the feedback from our design partners for Valo, who've been testing our AI admin tool, I think they're pulling us towards more automation and more workflows, beyond the access management to considering, licenses and, the third-party risk and integrations, automations, app connections, managed packages, basically everything that manages like what either systems or users can see or do inside a system like Salesforce. I think the sky's the limit. Like I'm really excited about the latest advancements in terms of AI models to become more effective at understanding the context where this happens. I think maybe the next stage, what I'm really excited about, is also like how then maybe the AI and these tools can actually face the end users as well as employees, and maybe kind of increase the effectiveness of like ticketing systems that, like, maybe the old days I have to file a ticket that like, hey, can I access to this report? Or I need to, get this Tableau report up and running, and how do I do it? Talk to the IT or talk to the owners, but like actually automating all those requests and just, making them more intelligent. And all of that like can be done very safely, securely, private, respecting privacy and all of that. So really, I think really excited for next year, and the sky's the limit.
Yeah, and that's where I think you guys have the advantage. I think coming from a cybersecurity background makes it so much easier to do AI right, because you're already used to putting guardrails in, you're already used to having compliance and keeping things within a certain confine. So I think that might be one of your advantages in the future is, okay, I understand cybersecurity. And then to me, I also see leadership coming into play, because now you're not just going to lead people, you're going to be leading NHIs and leading tool sets. So I'm kind of curious, how do you manage non-human interfaces, non-human entities? What are they?
I think transparency is the key. I think that's what we're really trying to build with Valo, is to provide transparency to what are all the users and systems connecting to your environment, and what are they doing, what are they accessing, if anything at all. And you might realize that you have a lot of redundant things. You have a lot of technical debt. Yeah, and you can use AI to sweep the shelves.
Love it. Love it. So let's kind of give some key takeaways for the viewers, what we had today. What I'm hearing is we can already leverage solutions to take away a lot of the mundane, especially things like comparing and contrasting user permissions or making a determination what to do in Salesforce. Sounds like, number one, you can already do that today. Yari, is that accurate?
Right. Like discussed earlier, I think there's multiple solutions around user access management. I think a lot of those solutions today kind of provide you insights into how things are done. You're downloading CSVs and you're comparing things in an Excel sheet. I think the key is how we as organizations, customers, big enterprises move to automation and actually then kind of better workflows where then the work happens on the users and the admin's behalf.
So if someone's listening and they're about to spend 2.5 hours on something, think twice before you spend the 2.5 hours. Go get the demo at Valo or go talk to Ari and figure out if you need to do that. So that's one big takeaway, is this automation and AI is already there. Second big takeaway is things are going to be even more complex because of the speed and nature of how businesses are operating. So you're going to have these tools in a different way in the future. Even if you're not thinking about it now, it is happening, going to happen. So I feel like there's a now action, which is you can already start, but then you already are going to have to be thinking, what's the nature of your admin roles and how do you change that? Ari, I don't know if there's any other takeaway, and that would be helpful from your consultant view.
Yeah, I mean, just the nature of everything is just getting more and more granular, more and more detailed, industry requirements, compliance, security, all of these things. And this in Salesforce, many of you may know, is pushing on a move away from profiles as they stand today into more permission set, more fine-grained control. So it just becomes more and more important that we are able to do these things at scale. So I think a really big takeaway is just to realize where all of this is going, and you're not going to be able to manage all these little details at scale without a lot of help, whether it's automation or AI or at least some really great observability.
Great. Well, I want to thank you both. You've been great experts in sharing your insights and real world views. It's exciting to have both an implementer and expert on the consultant side and an innovator, developer, creator, all on the same conversation. So I appreciate your time. And if you're listening, like I said, check out the demo and feel free to reach out to Ari and let us know what you think of this format and this idea. And if there's topics you want to hear, this is a Tech Talk series. So we welcome all your topics related to this. Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.